It's already been said before that it's been found that it's the Sufi stories that contain most clearly for us the levels of stories. The level where there's a teaching or a moral, the level that has the sacred symbols and numbers and archetypes, and the level that is that unifying character or theme. So let's see if we can define these three levels in this story. It's the story of a young merchant by the name of Yunus. Now Yunus was very successful as a merchant, but there was one thing missing in his life, and that was a wife. He longed to settle down with a family, but he had not failed to notice that when he passed his neighbor's house, that there was a young maiden who would sometimes appear in the window. So Yunus approached his neighbor and said, "Would you have any objection to my becoming your son-in-law?" And the neighbor said, "Well, yes, I do happen to have one last daughter who is of marriageable age, but my dear friend and neighbor Yunus, I would not inflict her upon you." "Oh, why?" said Yunus. And the neighbor said, "Because she's got the most terrible temper. She's irascible." But, said the neighbor, "but I have heard that if you can get 3 drops of water from the well of sweetness, it would change her completely." But you wouldn't want to go to all that trouble for my Fatima." But Yunus said, "No, tell me where I can find this well of sweetness, and I will endeavor to get that water." "Well," said the neighbor, "I don't know, but the old beggar woman who sits on the steps of the mosque, she knows." So Yunus went off to the market and he bought himself a small glass vial. And then he went to the steps of the mosque where the old woman was begging with her tin in front of her. And he put in a few coins into her tin and he asked her, "Where can I find the well of sweetness?" And the old woman said, "It's located in the domain of the giant. And for that, you must travel 7 days to the east and then 7 days to the west." So Yunus immediately set out, because the old woman said, and there you'll find a river, and you have to cross the river, and then you'll be in the giant's domain. So Yunus set off. It was a very arduous journey, but he did as he was told. 7 days to the east, 7 days to the west, and sure enough he came to the raging river. But there was a ferryman who ferried travelers across. So on the way, Yunus said, "Where can I find the domain of the giant?" And the ferryman said, "Oh, well, it's just where we're landing on the other side of the river." But he said, "If you meet him, you have to be sure to be very polite to him, because if you're not, he's going to kill you with his big club." So when they landed on the other side of the river, Yunus was very, very tired. It had been a long time of travel. So he lay down and he went to sleep. But when he woke up, he felt as though he was sleeping in his warm, comfortable bed. But when he shook himself awake, he found that he was resting in the palm of a great giant. And the giant looked down at him and laughed at him and said, "Oh, little human, what are you doing in my domain, and what do you want?" Well, Yunus, remembering the advice, said, "Oh, honorable giant, I give my respect and my salutations to you. I'm seeking the well of sweetness. I need 3 drops because I want to get married, and I need this to sweeten my wife." And the giant said, "Well, had you not been polite to me, I would have squished you in my hand. But since you've been polite to me, I will tell you. In my cave, which is my abode, there is a passageway. And when you follow that passageway, you will come to meet a 3-headed dragon. But if you greet the dragon with the words, 'Blessed be the name of the great King Suleiman,' he will let you pass." And so, this is how it happened. Yunus entered the cave of the giant and made his way down the long passageway and met the 3-headed dragon, blowing fire from its mouth. But at the words spoken, the dragon let him pass, and he soon came to a clearing where there was an ethereal being kneeling beside a well, drawing up from it buckets of water. So this ethereal being said to Yunus, after the usual greetings, "Give me your vial and allow me to fill it for you." So Yunus handed over his small vial, and the ethereal being filled the vial with water, which contained the 3 drops. And then Yunus bent down to kiss the ethereal being, but as he did so, it disappeared. But Yunus had to make his way back down through the dark passageway, and it seemed that it was even more arduous than it had been when he traversed it. At first, his feet were cut with rocks, and his hands by feeling along the dark passageway. But then, of course, he came back where the dragon was located, but again, using the words that had been given to him in the name of King Suleiman, blessed be his name. So he was allowed to pass. But when he came out of the cave, there was the giant waiting. He said, "Oh, little mortal, how was your journey?" "Oh, yes," said Yunus, "it was very successful." "Ah," said the giant, "well, now you have to serve me for 1 year and 7 days before you're allowed to return to your home." So Yunus did what slaves do. He washed the giant's shirts, and he stirred the giant's porridge, swept the hearth of the giant fire. And after 1 year and 7 days of quite willing service, the giant, being pleased with his service to him, gave him a bag of gold, and sent him on his way. But when he got back, he came to his neighbor's house. His neighbor greeted him and said, "Oh, I didn't know where you were, but greetings. Yes, you've been gone so long." And Eunice, of course, handed over the vial from the well of sweetness, and the neighbor was very delighted. And Eunice immediately went off to his house to put on his finery and arrange with the imam to come to perform the wedding ceremony. So, of course, this is as it happened. Eunice came back in his finery, and the bride was brought down with her veils, and the ceremony took place. There was a lot of feasting, and then in the evening, when it was time for them to retire to their chamber, and the veil of his bride would be lifted, when he took the veil off her face, he was delighted to find that she was a most beautiful being. And when she spoke, it was like the sound and tinkling of bells. And Eunice said, "Oh, thank the goodness for the well of sweetness. I have a beautiful and gentle bride." And his wife, Fatima, began to laugh, and Eunice said, "What are you laughing at?" And Fatima said, "Well, I've always been like this. I've always spoken like this. I've always been like this." And Eunice said, "Well, why are you laughing at me then?" "Oh," said his beautiful bride, "you see, it's my mother. She has the most dreadful temper, and my father heard that if he could obtain 3 drops from the well of sweetness, that his life after that time would be. So he made a vow that I would not be allowed to be married until someone brought those 3 drops from the well of sweetness." Well, needless to say, Eunice and Fatima lived a very long and happy and harmonious life, and Eunice was very happy that he had at least a congenial mother-in-law. So, first of all, what would you glean as there being the lesson or the moral or teaching to be found in this story? What arises for you as a possible...
Read your contract before you enter into it. Things are not as it seems.
Mm-hmm.
Don't assume things.
Yes, you could say. I think there's something else there that we've learned. We've learned in our quest.
When you have desire something, you also have a blind spot.
All right. But if you have a desire for something, you cross the obstacles. You're willing to do whatever is necessary to bring it about. To say, you go do what you got to do. You know, I'll do this and face it and do it.
Well, you have to go and get those drops, even if it wasn't for her to marry her anyway.
Yes. And what about the sacred numbers and symbols and archetypes? What do the threes and sevens mean for us in terms of sacred numbers? Have we discovered that in our life, besides recognizing that 7, the 7 wonders of the world, the 7 cycles of life, and so forth, we know all of these things. But in our own life, what does this 7 represent for you? Can you clearly define those levels? We know 7, 14, 21.
Well, 7 is often considered a cycle.
It's cycle, yes, they are the cycles of life. And so we know that. But when it comes in stories like this, what would you see as the significance of it? And in so many stories, 7 days and 7 nights, etc., etc. What other than the cycles of life have you discovered about 7s?
My birthday.
Oh, well, that's significant in itself, isn't it? Yes.
It's like a regeneration.
Right. Yes.
Some completion and then it starts again.
That's right.
Is that why they call it a week?
That's why they call it a week. And what about the 3s? In so many. I mean, all right, the 7s are the cycles, but what are the 3s?
3 levels of existence.
The 3 levels of existence. We can say will have to come together.
It's like you need 3 aspects to be complete.
It can be complete, yes. And what about the giant?
Well, that would be the biggest, scariest object that you had to do, that to pass.
To pass.
There's some fear that was so ginormous.
So they reckon God was big.
But then there's the dragon.
The dragon with the 3 heads. Yes, yes, yes,
If
yes.
it was as big as me, imagine how big the giant's hand was.
Oh, yes, indeed. So what about this 3 that needs the sacred words or the key or the symbol to pass, which is so many stories have this.
It's the secret, isn't it?
Yes,
It's like the
or a
3
key.
aspects.
Right.
It's like one is honour,
Uh-huh.
one's regard,
Right.
yeah, and the other one was humility.
Okay. And isn't this often what we find in these stories, that we have to have these 3 tests? And a key to open the door, which is like the sacred words. And in our own life, have you come across any kind of situation like this, recognizing that we've had 3 tests and we do it, oh my God, there's a 3rd thing happened, that's done now, isn't it? And we have trip our toe 3 times or fall over, whatever it is. How many times do we do that? Oh, there's the 3, it's done now.
Not necessarily. Another set of 3 might begin.
Of course, we know it. There's 3s and 3s and 3s. But in saying those words, in the recognition of it, what's the difference between saying blessings be on the name of King Suleiman and saying, oh good, that's done?
That's honour.
Isn't that enough? To put paid to whatever it is, would you agree? Completion, acknowledgement of that,
The acknowledgement
of that completion.
Well, often
that you've
when,
done it.
Yes, you've done it. I've done it now.
Yeah.
often when you're doing energy work, when your energy work's coming to an end, you say it is done.
Yes, right.
So,
Yes, yes.
just to acknowledge it.
Yeah. So, what then is that theme or the character that puts it all together? That 3rd level of stories.
Well, you mentioned pie, didn't you? Didn't you mention pie at the beginning?
Who?
Did I have a pie at the beginning of your story?
No,
You didn't?
no.
Oh, okay, I was dreaming. Are you talking about the trident?
No, talking about the 3 levels of stories. The 3rd level is that level where there is the character or the theme that binds it all together.
Just surrendering to the process, to the,
Mhm.
yeah,
That's what had to be done to get there.
Yes, yes, yes.
The quest.
The quest. Yeah, the longing. Wouldn't you agree?
What's that?
The quest.
Quest.
Yes.
Similar, I was thinking of purpose. Which is similar.
The family. He wanted a family. And what does that designate? Wholeness, doesn't it? Completeness.
Yes.
Yes.
Completeness, and so he had to journey beyond himself.
Himself to, yes,
obtain that.
obtain that. Yes.
His fears, and down through the tunnel.
Into the tunnel and
Well,
come out scratched and battered and feet and torn. So.
And this etherical being vanished to bone. Vanished once he got the water.
Yes. So what is it that's vanished for us after we get this elixir?
The anxiety of doing it, really.
All the desire finished.
Or could it be God? Because we use God all along to be our, guide. And when we get to the end of the journey, poof! Where's it gone? Where's it gone?
You got to serve for a year and 7 days.
Yes. So that's another one, isn't it?
That sucks.
But look at
He
her.
thought he was done. All he had to do was get to the river a year and 7 days.
And then but he also had to, afterwards his hands are cut and his feet are cut, and he has to come out and serve the giant. What is it that follows this point of realization? Yes, it's done. The dishes. Yes. Yeah.
chopping wood.
Or that, like that book, After Enlightenment, the laundry.
Yes,